Hi, welcome to another exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show. Another exciting show, definitely another exciting guest. Today we're going to talk to Miss Daniela Wolfe, who let me go here with this. This is something I never heard of. A burnt out specialist.
Yep.
Now, wait a minute. We're not done with this. So let me tell you where we're going with today's story. I like the way she said burnt out specialist, because I think we've all have experienced this in our lives, whether it be, and I think it's mostly, and she can help me with this, it's mostly job related. Maybe the second phase is relationship. The third, what would be the third? My friends? We're going to find out about all that. We're going to find out about all that. So that's welcome to the show, the lady who specializes in being burnt out, Miss Wolfe. How you doing, baby girl?
Good. Thank you so much for having me today, Andre.
Okay, so before we get started on the burnt out specialist part, who exactly is Miss Wolfe? Tell the viewers a little bit about who you are first.
Yeah. So I'm Daniela Wolfe. Bestie Life is how you can find me on social media, websites, all those kind of things. I've been a social worker for 30 years. So clinically trained in all things mindfulness, stress management, coping skills, cognitive behavioral therapy, like all those kind of things. I'm also a mom of two, as well as I have been through my own burnout. Like you said, we've all been there. My journey started about 20 years ago. I was going through a divorce. My kids were super young. They were 4 and 6 months old. And so I was a single working mom. I'm a high achiever. I tried to do it all, be it all, wanted to prove and show that I could handle it all myself, and drove myself straight into my own burnout. I was irritable. I was snapping at my kids more than I wanted to. It looked good on the outside, but on the inside, I was crumbling. And I kind of had this breakdown moment where I realized this was not who I was. This wasn't who I wanted my kids to remember growing up. And so I started kind of practicing what I help everybody else with as a social worker, and really started to turn it on myself, and really found, through my own trial and error as well. But, what really are those key areas to focus on to help create that mental fitness, that resilience, those protective factors to help us manage life, because we all have different levels of stress and things that happen to us. And for me, I started with a simple gratitude practice, 3 to 5 things that, I was grateful for each day. My grocery store had free childcare at the time, and that sounds great, but I had to work through a lot of mindset, a lot of limiting beliefs and guilt every time I put my kids in there, and realized, I think, again, we can be so much harsher with ourselves than we are with other people. As well as I joined a gym that had free childcare, but just these 3 simple areas, I found not only did I start showing up better, my kids were doing better. They were excited to tell me who they met, what they did. People around me started to see a difference somehow, just based on the things I was talking about and doing and asking, how was I fitting this in? How could they do these kind of things for themselves? And I realized I think we're all looking for that validation and permission that it's okay to take time for ourselves, that it's okay to put ourselves on our own to-do list.
Let's go back
That
a
was
minute.
20 years ago, and it's absolutely grown from there.
Let's go back a little bit, because you gave us a lot of information right there, but this started long before you start mastering the craft. So, so you mentioned overachiever. So a lot of these things, and you're a social worker. I'm not trying to play social worker. I don't have those credentials, but I would think, being a social worker, a lot of behavioral modifications happen in the home. They start in the home. They start with the people that we come in contact with the most. So that's go with you because you created something. So in order to create, it had to start with you. So what were some of the limited beliefs in the way in which you were structured before you got
Mhm.
into the corporate world or to deal as a social worker?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly where I help so many of my clients start with as well, because like you said, this didn't just show up overnight. It didn't show up from the
Right.
job. It's those that mindset that gets ingrained in us from when we're little kids, the environment that we're raised in, the unspoken kind of beliefs that are taught to us. You know, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She came from Sicily. She was very traditional. And so, you know, that putting herself last is what I saw growing up. You know, she made sure everybody else was fed, everybody else was taken care of before she took care of herself.
You mentioned something that was pretty profound here, your family's origin
Hmm.
and their beliefs. When you talk about Sicilian, Italian culture, it's very deeply structured. It's almost like, let's call it what it is, almost like the mafia. You know, they're like this. A lot different. There's other cultures that have strong values the same, and we're shaped by those values. As you saw what was going on in your house, when did you realize when did the values that was set in your house start to play a significant crippling factor in your relationship moving forward in life is what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily even all negative stuff, but I think we all grow up in different households, different ways, different things are kind of informally, subconsciously taught to us. You know, good girls don't speak up. You know, you have to work hard and hustle to get ahead. You know, a good mom puts everybody else first, those kind of things. And we don't, they're not even told to us directly, but I think a lot of times we internalize them until we start to realize they're no longer serving us. That way of thinking doesn't serve us, but because they've been there for so long, that's what plays on repeat. And I always start with mindset when I start working with clients, because I think so many times we just jump straight to the actions and wonder why isn't this helping, why don't I feel any different? And I truly believe when you think differently, you feel differently. And when you feel differently, that's how you can act differently in a way that's actually going to serve you. And so to look at, you know, if you just sat to rest for 10 minutes, no phone, no remote, no nothing, what comes to your head? What are some of the things that creep up? Is it I should be doing this? This is lazy. I don't have time for this, you know, and those are the limiting beliefs. Those are some of the underlying factors that can be really getting in the way of you taking care of yourself on a day-to-day basis. And so to start looking at what are the things that come up when you do try and rest is a great place to start.
So what were the limiting things that had handicapped you as a
Um,
person?
for me,
Because
I think I saw.
because when you create a program, it's usually created because things wasn't working right in your life.
Mhm.
So, what were the limiting things? I know we talked about them, but we didn't really focus on the things that put you in the projected that where you're at now. So, what were some of the crippling factors that you had to deal with that was based on those limiting those values that you spoke on?
Yeah. One of them was that asking for help. At the time, I saw it as a weakness. I assumed people were going to judge me for it and think I wasn't capable. So I had to let go of that mindset and see that actually asking for help is a superpower. It not only enhances my life and my experiences, but it allows somebody else to give back, to be there for me. You think of how good you feel when you get to help somebody else out. You know, I was creating an opportunity for the people who care about me to be there for me in that way. Another one was, again, taking time to prioritize myself, things I enjoyed, things I did. I saw that as I was taking away from the people around me and the other things I needed to do. But I saw when I reframed that and actually started experiencing it, it actually gave back so much more to the people around me when I started doing those things, when I took time for myself, when I took care of myself. It gave back tenfold. I was more productive. I was more successful. My relationships were stronger, you know, and those are just a couple of them. We all carry, you know, again, the, these old habits and patterns. And so when we go through this process of working on our mindset, we're actually creating new neural pathways, new ways of thinking, new default methods of navigating our day to day life.
You mentioned some things that I thought was really shocking, but you were so forthcoming with it. You found yourself being a little disruptive with your own children. Like most people would never admit that, but I'm glad that you did. What was the shifting point for you to realize something just ain't really right here? When was that light bulb moment?
My light bulb moment was in the middle of, we had at the time, I live in upper Western New York, and we had this surprise October storm. So it was about 20 years ago. It was early October, but so the trees all still had leaves, and we had this massive ice storm. So power was out for like 5 days. We were sleeping by the fireplace to try and keep warm, just me and two little kids. I was going down in the basement to bail my sump pump every hour by myself because, again, I was trying to handle and do it all. And that just during one of those trips down to the basement trying to keep my it from flooding is when I kind of broke down and had that moment that this wasn't sustainable. We could not keep living like this. I couldn't keep living like this. And so that's when I started again those small practices. I started my daily gratitude practice that night. I still have the journal. I started writing in just 3 to 5 things every night, and it's a combination of, like you said, that mindset shift. I changed how I was planning my time and executing my days, as well as then adding all these different kinds of self care. And it's not, this cliche spa days, massages, bubble baths, those are nice, but real practical self care is a daily necessity, like sleeping, eating, and brushing your teeth, because you wouldn't eat on Sunday and think you're not going to be starving on Tuesday. I realized I needed to take care of myself and pour into myself, not just to feel calm and relaxed, but to have energy, to have confidence, and to show up in such a good way every single day.
Now, let me go back a little bit more here. Let's talk about relationship aspect, meaning what was lacking in that development phase during your relationship? Because you said something, you said, I had to now go in the basement. I had to do this by myself. I had to do this by myself. Not trying to get deep into why your relationship broke. Were you mentally available like you are now in that relationship prior? Does that make any sense? Because I think if you're having all of these things going on in your life, wouldn't that create just as much havoc in the relationship wise as well if you're not emotionally there like you are now?
Yeah, I'm not, it's not connected in that way. I'm not going to speak to that part.
So when you decide to have the light bulb moment and it goes off, what do you now do? You start basically you start, is it almost like a journal where you start to do self-reflection of things that you don't have versus or things that you need?
Honestly, it was more just gratitude, listing things that maybe made me smile that day, that brought me a little joy. It could have been the sun was out because I live in the Northeast, and winter times can be really dark and gray. Maybe someone held the door for me, just simple kindness and connection. Maybe I had my favorite banana smoothie that day. And so just focusing on small moments of gratitude allowed me to be present, allowed me to appreciate the things I did have, and just start building, from that small place of what filled me up and noticing more moments of joy and gratitude. It actually, there's a science behind that part as well. When you start a gratitude practice, you activate a part of your brain called the RAS, the reticular activating system. And it's almost kind of like, you ever, say you're going to go buy a red minivan, and all of a sudden you start seeing red minivans everywhere. You're like, oh my God, I never knew there were so many red minivans out there. And it's not that there's actually more of them, but you're actually turning on a part of your brain to start being more aware and start noticing more positive things, more red minivans, more joy, more moments that light you up. And so when you're intentional with a lot of these practices, you again are now triggering to start looking for things that make you happy, start looking for the positive, so that you're not focused on the negative the whole time. Because for whatever reason, you could have a great day and all of a sudden something goes awry and you're focused on that for the rest of the day, as opposed to being able to pull yourself back, not unpack in that place, and still see the good rather than just focusing on the negative.
How long did it take you to get to where you're at? Because I'm pretty sure this wasn't an overnight thing
No.
for you. So how long does it take the average person? You just
Mhm.
started this, so you're working with a few people. So how do you get them to get from point A to point B? Because this isn't an overnight mind shift for people,
No.
because in the real world, you're going to have bad things happen.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can do about it. So how do you teach how to how to let that go and keep moving forward?
Yeah, it is definitely a practice. It's not a one and done. Like I said, this started for me about 20 years ago, and I'm still a work in progress. I think we all are. We never stop learning and growing. On average, though, in working with my clients, I've found, about 3 months or so, because what we're actually doing is we're creating new new ways of thinking in our mindset, new habits, new ways we're working through our day. And it takes about a couple of months to really start ingraining them where they become more permanent, more automated, more things that we build you know, on a regular basis. And so you might not be completely done in 3 months, but you've built the foundation to keep building on, to have the tools and the skills more normalized as a part of your life so that you can keep adding different moments of self-care. You view it from a bit different angle. Like I said, I talk about it in a more practical way. So when I say self-care, it's how you eat, how you sleep, how you move, how you dress, how you decorate and organize your home, how you connect with others, how you think about money, as well as that traditional personal development like meditation, mindfulness, journaling, gratitude, and those practices. And so you can start to see more options and more opportunities to implement these micro moments throughout your day. And just like people, check the battery on their phone and are plugging it in all the time to keep it recharged, these micro moments throughout your day, and you intentionally structure your day so you always have them, is how you start building these habits and practices to then create this lifestyle, this system that works for you.
What is the average? What are at least three of the main issues that you have when people come to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, one of the big ones, and I think we started talking about it a little bit in the beginning. You were talking about what are the areas that can cause burnout. People always assume it comes from something negative. Something they don't like a job and things like that. But if you think about it, if you don't like your job, 5 o'clock comes and you're out of there. You're like, bye, I'm checking out, I'm done for the day. A lot of times, our lack of balance in our life comes from our inability to adapt, pivot, have resilience and boundaries. And boundaries is such a big one. So you think of the areas where you're following your passions, whether it's a business, a relationship, or even your kids, those are the things you go all in on. And that sometimes can set us up for burnout because we've tossed our boundaries out the window. You're like, I love this business I'm creating. I'm going to spend all my time doing it. I remember talking to a new mom friend. She was like, "Oh my God, you're my first adult conversation in 2 days." Because she was just so all in on her kids. Or if you're in a new relationship, you might spend more time with this person rather than your friends. And you kind of start to get out of balance because you don't have the boundaries. You ride the highs and lows so much more intensely because it's something you're passionate about, as well as, like I said, you're all in. And so the success or failure you internalize personally as your own successes and failures and things like that. And so just having that awareness of what are your boundaries like? How much time are you carving out for yourself? What are your priorities? Where are you on your to-do list? Usually we're at the bottom or close to the bottom. We don't think of ourselves in that way, as well as we're not intentional when it comes to prioritizing, again, just these micro moments. It can be as small as even like 30 seconds to a minute, whether it's with your morning cup of coffee or having a timer go off where you sit for a minute and you just focus maybe on your breathing, hydrating, some shoulder shrugs. Science has shown just those short little micro moments can start to lower your heart rate, lower your cortisol, lower your stress levels, as well as increase the dopamine because you set a goal and you achieved it, and you start stacking these micro moments and creating these practices.
Why do you think why do you think that there is such an increase in individuals not recognizing that they have burnout or they're going through burnout?
Mhm. I think we've normalized it as a society and a culture. You ask so many people, how are they doing? Oh, I'm good. I'm busy. We've normalized busy as our go-to kind of validation that we're successful, that we're doing okay, that we're doing all the things, but we never really say how we're doing. We don't really check in with ourselves because I think that makes us uncomfortable if we really think about it sometimes. And so to really start looking at, you know, is the way we spend our time in our day-to-day basis truly in alignment with what we say our priorities and our values are? If we say family is important to us, but you haven't really carved out time just for your family in months or weeks or things like that, how important is it really to you? How fulfilled do you feel in meeting your values? If you say health is important to you, but you don't prioritize taking some time for movement or eating healthy or doing things that make you feel good and healthy, again, that's out of alignment. And so recognizing kind of not only what your true priorities and values are, but how much you're investing in them. Because a lot of times, whether you're a people pleaser and you feel like you need to make everybody else happy in order to be validated and important, whether you're a perfectionist, there's a lot of different kind of subcategories. I talk about a lot in my book as well, to kind of help you self-identify where is your burnout coming from, because it can be different for so many people. And so a lot of this journey can be very personal, but to really be able to self-assess, self reflect is what's going to help you figure out how to fill yourself back up, how to find the right micro moments for you. And it can look different on a day to day basis or the different seasons of your life. Like, for example, like we said, I've been on this journey for a while. So for me, I start and end my day with me. I start my day with movement and meditation, but it looks different every single day. There's some days I might only have 10 to 15 minutes. So I do a 5-minute yoga practice, maybe 5 minutes of meditation. Other days I might have 35, 40 minutes. And then at night, I end with skincare and an actual book. Some days I might only read 3 sentences. Some days I might read 3 pages. But the consistency of the fact that these happen every single day is where the momentum and kind of that magic happens of taking care of myself and getting that recharge benefit. It creates that muscle memory of knowing I'm doing these practices every day.
Before we wrap up, let's talk about this book. Tell me about the book and why there was a need to create the book.
Mhm. It's called Balance Breakthrough, a practical guide for busy professionals to take charge of their work, life, and well-being. And it's not like a sit and read it in a weekend kind of book. It really is meant to be a playbook for you to start your own journey. A lot of times, while working with a coach can get you there faster and more direct, a lot of times that doesn't work for people. They're not comfortable with that. And so this is everything I do with clients one-on-one in the book. It takes you through the self assessment process of kind of recognizing what burnout is, what's true work life balance, and what is mental fitness and what role that plays in our well being. And then the second half, we're really focusing on how to reframe your mindset, how to look at your time planning, as well as then those 8 different self-care pillars, and really giving you actionable strategies. Like I said, there's a digital workbook that goes with it to really help you do this process on your own if that's how you want to work through it, and ask questions along the way, and kind of figure out where are your mindsets tripping you up, what are your limiting beliefs, and how to start living in small micro moments differently.
You mentioned, before we wrap up, you mentioned 8 pillars.
Mhm.
Is that the magic number for the recipe that people deal with every day? Is conquering eight, or is there more?
I found that for the most part, those 8 areas that I mentioned, they encapsulate all the different areas of our life, and they actually all kind of work together. I mentioned sleep. If you don't get a good night's sleep, I don't know about you, but I crave carbs the next day, as well as I'm going to be a little cranky. And so I might not connect well with others, and I might not be motivated to work out. And so you can see how synergistically they all flow together. I actually use like a wheel analogy you would see in the book of how you could be rolling down the wheel, the road of life. And if one of those areas is out of alignment, you're going to feel that pothole like every time you hit that area that's out of alignment. And so it really helps you find some of that balance the way they all affect each other.
Now, in closing, you understand the word burnout. Thanks for coming on the show and explaining burnout, and that there is a solution to burnout. My final question here is, I know this is hindsight 2020,
Hmm.
knowing what you know now, what do you think knowing what you know now would have made a difference if in your life as it relates to past and then where you're at currently, had you
Hmm.
known all this stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, I would, like if I could talk to my 25-year-old self, I would tell her to give herself grace. I don't think, like I said, we're as kind to ourselves as we are to everybody else. I would never speak to my girlfriends the way sometimes in my own head I would talk to myself and beat myself up. And so to all learn to give ourselves the same grace and kindness that we would give to someone else is kind of looking backwards, because it's not about perfection. No one's perfect. I'm still not perfect. We all have our ups and downs. I still have stressful moments. I still have sometimes, it's not like I respond perfectly to everything, but I'm self aware enough at this point that I know I can act differently. But to give myself the grace that it's about continuing to grow and do better and not about being perfect.
How can the viewers reach out to you, get a copy of the book, and know more about the burnt out method?
Mhm. My website is the best place to find me. It's bestdlife.com. There you'll have access to a ton of free resources to help you get a flavor for some of this. You can listen to my podcast, read blog posts, you can order my book on Amazon, and even just reach out and say hi, ask a question, and connect with me on social media.
Let's talk about this podcast. What's the name of the podcast and what's it about? What do you talk about?
It's called Best D Life with Daniela. And I talk about a lot of, again, these practices and principles of, I just had an episode that's going to go live this week about, you know, progress over perfection and how to give yourself that grace in 15 minutes or less each day. Talk about, your mindset. We talk about how to internalize and practice some of these different practices and really break it down into small micro episodes. I'm all about, keeping things small and manageable because we all have a lot going on.
That sounds so beautiful. You know what, Miss Wolf, thank you so much for taking time out to come on the show and once again spread knowledge because that's what we do here. We not only have that beast mindset, but we're here to actually empower and engage great conversation with people. Make sure you guys click, subscribe, share this information because all it takes is one click of a button to make a difference in your life and somebody else's life. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another, and I do mean another, exciting episode of the Andre the Beast Creighton Show, 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 show.